Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are very pleased to share different stories about love and betrayal from around the world with you. Now let's begin today's journey of stories. Let's see how you get out of this one. The sound of sirens pierced sharply through the darkness, red and blue lights reflecting on James' shocked face. His hands were tightly bound by cold metal handcuffs, unable to understand how an ordinary Friday night had suddenly turned into this nightmare. Sir, someone reported that you're carrying illegal substances with intent to sell. Please cooperate with the investigation, the officer said sternly. Through the rear window of the police car, James saw the sight he least wanted to see. His wife Emily standing at their doorway, shoulder to shoulder with her friend Sarah and a familiar man. Their faces wore undisguised mockery. That man, James recognized him as Michael, an executive from Emily's company, even had his arm intimately around Emily's waist. In that moment, James understood everything. He never thought that after 7 years as an assistant prosecutor in Boston's highest court, he would be sitting in the back of a police car as a suspect. What was even more unbelievable was that all this came from the hands of the wife he deeply loved. As the police car drove away, Emily waved goodbye, shouting, "Honey, remember to use your legal skills to get out of this one." Then she burst into laughter with her friends. James knew he would never return to that place that was no longer home. 6 months ago, James and Emily's marriage still maintained a semblance of harmony. They owned a spacious house in Boston's suburbs. James worked at the court, focusing on cases involving illegal substance trafficking, while Emily was the marketing director of an advertising company. From the outside, they were a successful couple with a perfect marriage. In fact, the rift between them had already quietly appeared. This wasn't because James was a workaholic. On the contrary, James always tried to balance work and family. Their Friday night dates were never missed. They jogged together every Sunday morning, and special trips were arranged for each wedding anniversary. He even made time to come home for dinner during busy cases. However, Emily's ambition gradually changed her. She entered the company as an ordinary marketing specialist and climbed the ladder through her abilities and ambition. After becoming the marketing director, she began to frequently attend high-end social events and make various useful friends. "You don't understand, James," Emily said one night to her husband who was preparing dinner. "In the business world, connections are everything. I need to attend these social occasions." James wiped his hands and looked at her seriously. "I understand your career ambitions, Emily, but we haven't spent time together for 3 consecutive weekends." Emily waved her hand impatiently. "You're always like this. Only care about your small world and your so-called family time. Don't you want me to succeed?" James sighed. "Of course I do, but I believe success shouldn't come at the cost of our relationship." A flash of coldness passed through Emily's eyes. "Maybe your goals are too limited." It was during this period that Emily established an increasingly close connection with Michael, the newly appointed creative director of the company. Michael was a shrewd and capable man, well known in the industry. He was 10 years older than Emily, had been divorced twice, and had an impressive social circle and wealth. Initially, Emily viewed Michael only as a mentor for career development, but soon their relationship transcended colleague boundaries. Those overtime work and company events gradually became frequent and mysterious. Emily was attracted to Michael's charm and success, but at a deeper level, she was tempted by the lifestyle he represented, filled with excitement, power, and unbounded freedom. She began to believe that James couldn't understand her ambitions and needs, while Michael seemed to know exactly what she wanted. Each time Michael praised her creativity in front of colleagues or emphasized her contributions to important clients, she felt a professional recognition that James had never given her. James was not unaware of his wife's changes. Emily began to show indifference to family life, purchased new high-end clothing, started using expensive perfumes, changed her hairstyle, and even altered some living habits. When he tried to inquire about these changes, Emily always brushed it off with excuses of work pressure and personal growth. "I just want to try a new style." "Is that a problem too?" Emily asked defensively. James instinctively felt uneasy, but as a legal professional who believed in evidence and justice, he was unwilling to suspect his wife based solely on intuition. It wasn't until that Thursday night that everything became clear. That day, James finished work early to surprise Emily. When he opened the door, the living room was quiet. but he heard faint sounds coming from the upstairs bedroom. After quietly going upstairs, he saw the bedroom door slightly ajar, and through the crack, he could see Emily in bed with Michael. In that instant, James felt the world collapse. His instinct was to rush in, but his legal training made him restrain his impulse. He quietly retreated, sat in his car, and tried to clear his thoughts. He decided to gather more evidence and then handle the matter calmly. Over the next few days, James pretended everything was normal while beginning to document evidence of Emily's infidelity. He checked the expenditure records of their joint accounts and found numerous unexplained hotel expenses and restaurant bills. He even hired a private investigator to collect evidence, ensuring he wouldn't be at a disadvantage in future divorce proceedings. However, Emily was more cunning than he imagined. She discovered the private investigator's contact in James' phone and realized she had been exposed. In her panic, she sought help from Michael and her friend Sarah, and the three plotted a despicable plan. He deals with those illegal substance cases all day, but never thought it would become his weakness, Emily said to Michael, her eyes gleaming with conspiracy. The police only need an anonymous tip and some fabricated evidence. Sarah, as Emily's friend of many years, had always harbored resentment toward James because James had tactfully suggested that Emily reduce her association with Sarah, believing she wasn't a good influence on Emily. Sarah readily agreed to participate in this plan. The police will detain him temporarily, and even if it eventually proves to be a misunderstanding, this kind of disgrace is devastating enough for a prosecutor, Sarah said with a smile. Not to mention, you can use this opportunity to transfer assets to a safe place. Emily hesitated for a moment. Although James made her feel suffocated, although she no longer loved him, such betrayal seemed too cruel. But as her relationship with Michael deepened, the moral boundaries in her heart had become increasingly blurred. She began to believe she was constrained by marriage, and Michael was her true soulmate and the ticket to a better life. What are you still hesitating about? Michael whispered in her ear. He won't let you go. Think about what you'll lose in his divorce lawsuit. This is self-preservation, Emily. If you want us to be together, this is a necessary step. Michael's words were like hypnosis, making Emily determined. She told herself that this would only temporarily embarrass James and wouldn't cause long-term harm. After all, he had enough legal knowledge to defend himself. So, on that Friday night, Emily secretly hid some illegal substances in their home, then anonymously reported her own husband. The police quickly arrived and searched the house, discovering these items. When James was arrested, his eyes were filled with shock, betrayal, and sadness. But in that moment, there was also a firmness and resolve she had never seen before, as if he instantly understood that this marriage was beyond repair. At the police station, James quickly proved his innocence. As a prosecutor, he had working relationships with many police officers, and investigators soon found that the report was malicious and the substances had been planted. When the police prepared to further investigate who had framed him, James unexpectedly refused. "This is a family internal matter," he said calmly. "I don't want things to escalate further." The officer frowned at him. "But if it was your wife who did this, it could constitute a serious obstruction of justice." A flash of pain crossed James' eyes. "I know what that means, but I have my own way of handling it." The officer nodded understandingly. "I get it, but if you change your mind, feel free to come back anytime." After being released, James didn't go home. He went directly to his lawyer friend David's place, stayed there for a few days, and began divorce proceedings. He hired the best divorce lawyer in town, citing Emily's infidelity and malicious framing as grounds. "I don't need any buffer time, David," James told his friend that night, his voice calm but resolute. "I've completely seen through the nature of this marriage. If she can so easily betray and hurt me, then everything between us is already dead. There's nothing left to salvage." David looked at him with concern. "I understand you're in pain right now, but don't make any impulsive decisions. Maybe after cooling down for a few days." James shook his head, interrupting him. "This isn't impulsive, it's my most clear-headed decision. Some boundaries, once crossed, can never be returned to. She not only betrayed my love and trust, but also tried to destroy my career and dignity. This isn't temporary anger, David. This is protection for the rest of my life." Emily was very shocked when she received the divorce papers. She had originally thought James would beg desperately, try to repair their relationship, or at least angrily question her. But James' calmness and resolution caught her off guard. He just left like that? Emily asked Sarah, her voice filled with disbelief. No arguments, no attempts to reconcile, not even a word. Sarah seemed equally confused. Maybe he's more cowardly than we thought. But deep down, Emily knew that James' actions weren't out of cowardice, but a dignity and principle she had never understood. This made her feel a bit uneasy, but soon, Michael's comfort and promises reassured her that she had made the right choice. When Emily tried to contact James to discuss divorce terms, he responded through his lawyer, "I will no longer have any direct contact with you. Everything will be handled through lawyers." The divorce proceedings progressed more quickly and thoroughly than anyone had expected. James provided ample evidence of infidelity and malicious framing, and the court judged Emily's behavior as constituting serious marital misconduct. In the end, James got the house and most of their joint property, while Emily gained almost nothing. What shocked Emily even more was that James seemed to have anticipated her betrayal, having begun preparations months before their marriage ended. He had transferred some assets to separate accounts, prepared detailed financial records, and even saved records of Emily's intimate text messages with Michael and suspicious phone calls with Sarah. His preparation was so thorough, as if he had been waiting for this day to come. On the day the divorce was finalized, Emily finally saw James outside the courthouse. After 3 months, he looked much thinner, but his eyes were more determined, his posture more upright, as if he had shed a heavy burden. "Why?" Emily couldn't help but ask. "Why didn't you even give us a chance to reconcile? How could you discard 7 years of marriage so quickly?" James looked at her coldly, his eyes showing not anger, but a chilling indifference. "Because some betrayals, once they occur, can never be forgiven. You not only betrayed my love, but also tried to destroy my career and dignity. This wasn't a momentary impulse or mistake, Emily. It was a series of planned choices. But we were once so in love," Emily said with a trembling voice, trying to find a sign of softening in his eyes. "Once," James repeated, his tone bearing a sense of finality. "The person who loved you is already dead, at the moment I saw you and Michael in our bed. Now, I wish you and Michael happiness. But between us, there will be no more connection from now on. Don't try to contact me, and don't expect me to change my mind." With that, James turned and left, his steps firm, without any hesitation, without looking back. That was their last conversation, and also the last time Emily saw him in person. After the divorce, James resigned from his job in Boston and left the city with too many memories. No one knew where he went. He seemed to have vanished from the world, and even mutual friends couldn't contact him. Emily's relationship with Michael rapidly deteriorated after the divorce. Without the secret excitement of marriage, Michael quickly lost interest in Emily. He began to be picky with her, criticizing her work ability as not being what it used to be, and even publicly disparaging her ideas in company meetings. A few months later, Emily discovered that Michael had already begun pursuing another young woman in the company, an intern who had just graduated from college. "She has fresh ideas and creativity," Michael explained to Emily, his tone without any apology. "And you seem to have lost your passion." When Emily questioned him about the truth of their relationship, Michael coldly replied, "Don't be naive, Emily. We're both adults. We know this was just a game. Now the game is over. Maybe you should find a good man like your ex-husband." These words stabbed into Emily's heart like knives. She realized that for a moment's passion and illusory love, she had lost someone who truly loved her and a stable marriage. But it was too late. James had disappeared from her life, leaving no way to contact him. She often remembered the look in James' eyes when he left. That resolution made her understand that no matter how much she regretted, some damage, once done, could never be repaired. 7 years later, Los Angeles. Sunlight poured through the large windows into the office as James organized the files on his desk, preparing for the afternoon court session. As one of the youngest judges in the Los Angeles County Superior Court, his reputation was rapidly rising, known for his fair, rigorous, and uninfluenced judgments. After leaving Boston, James moved to the West Coast and restarted his life there. He first worked at a large law firm, focusing on criminal defense, then gradually emerged in the legal world. His talent and dedication to justice earned him a nomination as a judge at the age of 36, becoming one of the youngest judges in California. Over these years, James rarely dated and never remarried. The trauma of that marriage kept him distant from intimate relationships. He had tried dating a few times, all ending in failure. The longest relationship lasted 3 months, but when the woman began to talk about deeper commitment, he instinctively withdrew. "I'm sorry," he said to the lawyer named Rebecca. "You deserve better. I think I still can't open my heart." Rebecca nodded understandingly. "You know what, James, not all women will betray you. But until you believe that, you can't truly move forward." James knew she was right, but he couldn't overcome that psychological barrier. The shadow of betrayal was too deep, the ability to trust completely destroyed. He had accepted that this might be his norm for the rest of his life, focusing on his career, avoiding deep emotional connections. He poured all his energy into work, while also cultivating some healthy hobbies: hiking, reading, and classical music. His life was peaceful and fulfilling, though occasionally in the quiet of night he would think of the past, but that heart-piercing pain had become a dull ache. James' assistant Lisa knocked on the door and entered. "Judge, the materials for the 2 o'clock case are ready. It's a commercial fraud case. The defendant is accused of using false advertising to induce investors to invest in a project that doesn't exist. Many investors suffered heavy losses, including several retired elderly people and a charity raising funds for cancer patients." James nodded. "Thank you, let me take a look." When he opened the case file, a familiar name made his heart skip a beat. One of the defendants was actually Michael. The man in the photo was much older than he remembered, with a receding hairline and wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. But there was no doubt it was the man who had an affair with Emily years ago. "Interesting," James murmured to himself. Fate could indeed be ironic sometimes. After carefully reading the case, James found that this was a quite serious fraud case. Michael and several partners had established a marketing company called Future Homes, and through carefully designed advertising campaigns, induced investors to invest in a luxury eco-community project that didn't exist at all. They used exquisite brochures, fake architectural models, and forged environmental certifications to make investors believe this was a project that was both profitable and socially meaningful. They had defrauded over $15 million, with more than 200 victims. Many of the victims had lost their life savings. The material mentioned that a 78-year-old retired teacher, Marta Rodriguez, had invested all her retirement savings from 40 years of teaching and was now in dire straits. Another young couple had invested funds intended for their children's education and now faced a serious financial crisis. These stories filled James with deep anger. In the case materials, James discovered another familiar name that made his heart race: Emily. According to the materials, Emily, as the company's marketing director, chose to cooperate with the prosecution after the case broke, revealing the inside story of the entire scam. James took a deep breath, considering whether he should recuse himself from this case. This concerned not only his past with Emily, but also his grudge with Michael. But professional ethics told him that past personal grudges should not affect judicial fairness. As long as he could ensure absolute neutrality, he had a responsibility to fulfill his duty. After all, recusal would also mean that victims might have to wait longer for justice. He picked up the phone, contacted the court's ethics committee advisor, and consulted on how to handle such a situation. After receiving confirmation that he could continue to hear the case, James decided to stick to his duty, but would be particularly cautious, ensuring that every judgment complied with legal norms. Before the afternoon court session began, James made sure he fully understood every detail of the case. When he donned his robe and walked into the courtroom, he had completely locked his personal emotions in his heart. "All rise. The Los Angeles County Superior Court is now in session," presided over by Judge James, the bailiff announced. As the defendants and witnesses entered the courtroom, James saw Emily, whom he hadn't seen in 7 years. She looked much more haggard than he remembered, with fine lines at the corners of her eyes, and the once confident, shining look in her eyes had dimmed. Her clothing was still fashionable, but no longer as flamboyant as before, and her hair was cut short, making her appear more mature. She clearly hadn't noticed yet who the judge was. When Emily took the oath to testify and looked up at the judge's bench, Her expression instantly froze. Her eyes widened. Her lips trembled slightly, obviously recognizing James. After a brief shock, a series of complex expressions flashed across her face. Surprise, confusion, fear, and finally a strange relief, as if the gears of fate had finally meshed into the right position. James, however, maintained a perfect professional attitude, as if the person across from him was just a stranger witness. Please state your name and occupation. His voice was steady, without a hint of fluctuation. Emily's voice trembled slightly. Emily, was the marketing director of Future Homes. Please describe in detail your responsibilities at the company and the information you know about this fraud case. James calmly guided the court proceedings, his gaze focused and calm, as if the woman before him was not the one who once deeply loved and deeply hurt him, but just an ordinary witness. Over the next few hours, Emily detailed how Michael had planned the entire scam. Her testimony was clear and organized, showcasing her professional expertise in advertising and marketing. Initially, the project seemed legitimate. We had architectural designs, environmental assessment reports, and even preliminary approval documents from government departments, Emily explained. But as time went on, I noticed some inconsistencies. The architect never came to conduct a site survey. The environmental reports didn't match the actual situation, and the approval documents were forged. Emily described how she gradually discovered the entire project was fictitious and how Michael threatened her when she raised questions. He said I was already in too deep, and if the project collapsed, I would be the first person to be prosecuted, Emily said, her eyes occasionally glancing at James, as if seeking his reaction. He had enough material to make all the responsibility fall on me. So, what made you finally decide to cooperate with the prosecution? The prosecutor asked. Emily was silent for a moment, her gaze briefly meeting James before moving away. I saw the stories of those investors, those people who lost everything. I thought of the mistakes I had made in the past, those hurts I couldn't make up for. I decided that this time, at least, I would do the right thing. During the trial, James noticed that Michael's gaze changed from initial shock to anger and fear. Obviously, Michael had recognized him too and realized this might be disadvantageous for himself. When the prosecutor presented evidence of how Michael had deceived investors, he uncomfortably shifted in his seat, occasionally nervously looking toward the judge's bench. However, each of James' questions and every ruling strictly followed legal procedures, showing no signs of favoritism or revenge. He even gave fair consideration when the defense attorney raised some borderline objections. His professionalism earned the respect of everyone in the courtroom. A particularly notable detail during the trial, when Michael's defense attorney tried to question the credibility of Emily's testimony, suggesting she was testifying only to reduce her own culpability, James allowed this question but strictly controlled the boundaries of the questioning, not allowing the defense attorney to engage in personal attacks or irrelevant historical digging. Please limit your questions to facts directly relevant to this case, James calmly told the defense attorney. After the trial, James returned to his office, feeling a strange calmness. The pain from 7 years ago seemed to have become distant, as if it happened to someone else. Seeing Emily and Michael in court, he had expected to feel strong emotional fluctuations, but in reality, he only felt a kind of detachment and satisfaction that justice was being served. In the judgment several days later, James, based on evidence and legal provisions, delivered a severe but fair sentence to Michael and other accomplices, 15 years imprisonment and full compensation. The reasons for the judgment were detailed and sufficient, and no one could question its fairness. Michael Wilson, your actions not only damaged investors' property, but also destroyed many people's dreams and futures. The court finds that, considering your leading role in the fraud and the scale and persistence of the fraudulent behavior, a sentence of 15 years imprisonment is appropriate. James' voice was steady and powerful as he read the judgment. After the judgment was announced, when everyone else had left the courtroom, Emily stayed behind, approaching the judge's bench. Your Honor, could I take a moment of your time? She asked softly, her voice carrying obvious hesitation and nervousness. James looked at her, expressionless. His first reaction was to refuse, to cut off any connection with the past. But his professional ethics told him that as a judge, He should maintain an open attitude to hear from parties involved. He hesitated for a moment, then briefly nodded. In my office, but the clerk must be present. In the office, the clerk sat quietly in the corner, recording the conversation. Emily looked around this space filled with books and legal documents, with James' degree certificates and various legal honors hanging on the walls. On the desk, besides case files, there was only a photo of him with a golden retriever, no photos of any family members or partners. You succeeded. Emily finally spoke, her voice carrying a hint of bitter admiration, even more successfully than we imagined when we were together. James simply nodded, his expression cold. Emily, is there something you need? I have to prepare for my next case. Emily looked directly into his eyes, trying to find the once familiar warmth, but saw only cold unfamiliarity. I know you may not want to hear this, but I must say, I'm sorry for everything I did back then. Framing you was the most despicable act of my life. James calmly looked at her, his eyes showing no fluctuation. The court has sentenced Michael and his accomplices. As a prosecution witness, you won't face charges. You don't need to apologize to me to seek sympathy. No, this isn't to seek sympathy, Emily said eagerly. It's because I truly regret it. Seeing you sitting on the judge's bench today, I feel proud of you and ashamed of my own foolishness back then. Your feelings are irrelevant to me, James coldly responded. This is just a peculiar coincidence that we meet in court. But it doesn't mean there are any private matters between us that need to be discussed. Do you hate me? Emily asked, her voice weak. James looked at her, his gaze like a knife. Hatred requires continuous emotional investment, and I have completely erased you from my life. I don't hate you, because that would mean you still have significance to me. I just feel completely indifferent toward you. Emily was stung by this answer, tears beginning to well in her eyes. You've so thoroughly erased our past? 7 years of marriage means nothing? We were once in love, James. Doesn't that mean anything to you at all? Past love cannot offset later betrayal, James answered, his voice without a hint of fluctuation. You not only betrayed my feelings, but also tried to destroy my career and dignity. This kind of harm has no possibility of being repaired. Emily tried to step closer. I know I made unforgivable mistakes, but can't people change? Look at my choices now. I risked danger to expose Michael's scam, helping those victims. Doesn't that mean I've grown? Your current choices are your own business, nothing to do with me, James said coldly. Maybe you have indeed changed, or maybe circumstances forced you to make different choices. But either way, the story between us ended long ago. Emily wiped away tears. Do you have a new partner? Have you found happiness? That's not something you need to know, James said coldly but firmly. Emily, whatever your purpose in coming here today, I hope you can understand one thing. Our life paths have completely separated. You go your way, I'll go mine. Please don't try to contact me again, and don't expect there to be any reconciliation or forgiveness between us. Emily's face paled, but she managed to nod. I understand. I just want you to know, losing you is my life's biggest regret. And choosing to betray me was your own decision, James pointed out mercilessly. You need to live with that decision and its consequences for the rest of your life, just as I must live with the trauma your betrayal brought. Emily seemed to want to say something, but in the end only lowered her head and turned to leave the office. At the door, she stopped, without turning back. You know, Michael never really loved me. Less than 3 months after the divorce, he began to abuse me, controlling my every move. I lost everything, including my self-respect. James didn't respond, just silently watched her figure disappear through the doorway. His expression didn't show the slightest wavering, as if the conversation had just been an ordinary court meeting. The clerk looked at this scene in confusion, but James simply said, "Thank you for your assistance. You may leave now." In the following weeks, the follow-up handling of the case kept James extremely busy. Michael was sent to federal prison to begin serving his sentence, and his assets were frozen for victim compensation. A month later, James received a letter. The sender was Emily. He stared at the envelope for a long time, almost wanting to throw it directly into the shredder. But in the end, he opened it, perhaps out of some professional habit, or perhaps just to confirm that the past was indeed past. The letter had no opening pleasantries. It went straight to the point. James, I don't expect you to read this letter. much less respond to it. But I need to say these words, even if just written on paper. I won't make any excuses for my actions. I betrayed your love and trust, then tried to destroy your career. These decisions were all made by me. It was my greed, selfishness, and stupidity that caused all this. After the divorce, I thought being with Michael would bring the life I desired. However, I soon found myself trapped in a nightmare. Michael began to control my everything, my work, my social circle, even my clothing. When I tried to resist, he would demean me in various ways, making me believe I was nothing without him. I was trapped in this relationship for 4 years, until discovering his scam gave me a chance to escape. I know these experiences might give you some satisfaction that justice has been served. But the truth is, even without these painful experiences, I would regret losing you. Seeing you become a respected judge, seeing you achieve the dreams we once talked about, I feel proud of you and incredibly stupid for my choices back then. I don't expect your forgiveness. Some hurts are too deep to repair. I just want you to know that in the darkest moments of my life, it was the integrity and courage you taught me that helped me make the decision to expose Michael. Perhaps it's ironic. I chose to betray the only person who truly loved me, only to be completely betrayed by the person I chose. But that's not the purpose of this letter. I'm writing just to say, thank you for your resolute departure back then. It was the best lesson for me, and the only time in my life I truly faced the consequences of my actions. Emily. James finished reading the letter, folded it expressionlessly, then put it into the shredder. He felt no anger, pain, or pity, only a detached sense of distance. Emily's pain was irrelevant to him. Her repentance couldn't change the past. He chose to continue moving forward, never looking back. On the other hand, Michael was counting the days in prison. He was assigned to a medium-security federal prison. The conditions weren't harsh, but for someone who had lived in luxury, this was like hell. The once glamorous creative director was now just an ordinary prisoner with inmate number 89721. His 2 divorces and now fraud conviction had cost him all social status and connections. Prison life exposed Michael's true character. He tried to use his business world tactics to establish position in prison, flattering the strong, bullying the weak, but these tricks didn't work here. Other inmates had no goodwill toward this suit-wearing con man, and the guards were annoyed by his arrogant attitude. "Heard you conned a lot of people, including a charity," an older inmate said to Michael in the cafeteria, his eyes filled with contempt. "I may have robbed banks, but at least I didn't steal from money meant to treat children with cancer." More ironically, Michael found himself imprisoned in a new reform-type prison approved by Judge James, part of James' judicial reform efforts. This prison emphasized education and vocational training, providing inmates with opportunities for rehabilitation. However, Michael's arrogance made him refuse to participate in any reform programs. He still believed he would soon get a sentence reduction or transfer to better facilities through his network of connections. However, reality soon dealt him a heavy blow. His legal team, after receiving their final fee, began to handle his case perfunctorily. His appeal was rejected, his application for sentence reduction denied. He then realized that not one of those friends from cocktail parties was willing to speak for him, with most even distancing themselves from their relationship with him. One day, Michael received an unexpected visitor, Sarah, Emily's friend. Michael had thought she came to bring him some news or support from the outside world, but Sarah's intentions were completely different. "I just wanted to see with my own eyes how pathetic you look," Sarah said coldly, her eyes filled with vindictive pleasure. "Emily told me about your adaptation to prison. I wanted to confirm it myself." "Emily? She still cares about me?" Michael asked sarcastically. Sarah gave a cold laugh. "Care? No. She just wants to make sure you get the punishment you deserve. You know what? She's now providing free consultation for those investors, helping them rebuild their credit records and financial plans." "Touching redemption story," Michael said mockingly, but a flash of unease passed through his eyes. "Seems she's found a new value to exploit." "You'll never understand, will you?" Sarah shook her head. "Not everyone thinks only of themselves like you do. Emily is trying to make amends, while you don't even think you did anything wrong." Michael dismissed her. "So what? In a few years I'll be out, and those stupid investors will never get their money back." Sarah stood up. "Do you know who the judge is? The one who sentenced you to 15 years. Michael frowned. Of course I know. That's self-righteous James. I recognized him, and he recognized me. Then do you know his past with Emily? Michael's expression froze. What do you mean? James is Emily's ex-husband, the one she and you framed. Then she abandoned him, Sarah said with a cold smile. Fate can be ironic, can't it? You destroyed his marriage. Now he decided your future. Michael's face instantly turned ashen. That's impossible. This is absurd. Absurd? No, this is called karma, Sarah said finally, then turned and left, leaving Michael sitting alone in the visitor's room, his face pale. Sarah's revelation brought Michael unprecedented shock. For the past few weeks, he had been secretly hoping his appeal would succeed, or at least he'd get some form of sentence reduction. But now he realized it was all in vain. James hadn't shown any personal emotions in court, but Michael didn't dare gamble that he would remain so fair during the appeals process. The reality of prison life began to crush Michael. Those proud and arrogant traits of his were useless here, and instead brought him more trouble. Other inmates sensed his vulnerability and began to harass him more frequently. His cell was ransacked several times, his personal items stolen, and even in the cafeteria someone deliberately knocked over his tray. One night, as Michael lay alone on the hard bed, he truly felt despair for the first time. He thought of those investors he had deceived, those people who lost everything because they believed in him. He thought of Emily, how he manipulated her, used her, then abandoned her. He even thought of James, the man he never really cared about, whose marriage and happiness he destroyed with a casual hand. This wasn't remorse, but the fear and despair that came from being forced to face reality. Michael finally understood that his life had come to an end. Even if he could get out after 15 years, what awaited him was only a shattered world. No friends, no family, no career, not even reputation. The next morning, guards found Michael hanging from a bedsheet. When emergency responders arrived, he already showed no signs of life. After the news spread, no one mourned for him, no one held a funeral for him. His body was hastily cremated, his ashes unclaimed, eventually disposed of by the prison in a simple manner. A once flourishing person thus silently disappeared from the world, leaving not a trace behind. Meanwhile, James continued his career as a judge, winning widespread respect for his fairness and compassion. The cases he presided over often attracted media attention, and his judgments were regarded as exemplars in the legal world. He paid particular attention to cases involving domestic violence and fraud, providing strong judicial protection for vulnerable groups. When news of Michael's death reached James, he was preparing for another case. He simply nodded, then continued his work, showing no particular emotion. For him, Michael was just one of thousands of criminals, his death not worthy of special attention. In an interview with a legal journal, a reporter asked him what shaped his strict but fair judicial philosophy. After pondering for a moment, James replied, "Everyone has their own moral bottom line. When this line is broken, whether in personal relationships or before the law, there needs to be clear boundaries and consequences. Justice is not just about punishing wrongs, but more about protecting those who abide by the rules, maintaining basic trust in society." The reporter curiously followed up, "That sounds like a profound understanding from personal experience. Would you like to share more?" James simply shook his head. "My personal experiences aren't special. What's important is what I learned from them, and how I apply these lessons to my work." Years later, when James was nominated as a Supreme Court justice candidate, his past was inevitably dug up by the media. The story of how his ex-wife betrayed him, and how he fairly presided over the case of his ex-wife and the third party with a professional attitude, not even moved by his enemy's death, became the focus of public attention. However, James never publicly discussed this past. At the Senate confirmation hearing, when a senator directly asked about this history, James answered, "My personal experiences taught me that justice must transcend personal emotions. If I let personal grudges influence my judgments, then I don't deserve to sit on the judge's bench." This response won praise from senators of both parties, and ultimately he was confirmed by an overwhelming vote, becoming a justice of the United States Supreme Court. As for Emily, she chose a difficult but meaningful path. After Michael's fraud case ended, she didn't try to rebuild her marketing career, but founded a small consulting firm specializing in helping fraud victims deal with legal and financial issues. She used her professional knowledge to provide free consultation services to those who had been deceived, helping them rebuild their lives. She never remarried, nor did she try to re-establish any form of contact with James. She accepted her past mistakes and used the rest of her life to make amends, not to gain forgiveness, but because it was the right thing to do. Years later, when Emily watched James being sworn in as a Supreme Court justice on television, she smiled quietly. She felt proud of him, though knowing the gulf between them could never be bridged. She once had the love of a good man, which she foolishly threw away, while he proved with his life that betrayal is not the end, but can be the beginning of a greater journey. In his new home in Washington, James would sometimes stand on the balcony, watching the lights of this city of power. His life was fulfilling and meaningful, his judgments influencing the legal direction of the entire country. He had not chosen to forgive or forget past betrayal, but to transcend personal pain, transcend the impulse for revenge, to become a better person, a person who truly understands and upholds justice. This doesn't mean the wounds in his heart had completely healed. Some betrayals are too deep, even time cannot fully erase them. But he learned to live with these scars and transform them into a strength that made him better understand the complexity of human nature. In his office, there was an old photograph, taken when he had just become an assistant prosecutor. The young man in the photo was full of hope, not yet knowing the blow life was about to deliver. Whenever looking at this photo, James would think of the path he had walked and the choices and events that had shaped him. Betrayal taught him strength, loss taught him independence, pain taught him compassion. But he never learned to forgive those who had hurt him, nor did he ever feel the need to do so. For him, forgiveness wasn't necessary. What was important was to grow from the hurt and ensure the same hurt didn't happen to others. In James' lifetime, he presided over hundreds of cases, affecting countless lives. His name became a legend in the legal world, his judgments studied as textbooks in law schools. And behind all his achievements, there was an unknown source of motivation that betrayed marriage, that decisive moment when he chose not to look back, but to move forward without hesitation. Emily's betrayal created a great judge. Michael's evil deeds led to his own destruction, and Emily sought peace on the path of remorse and redemption. Three people, three destinies, all stemming from that Friday night of betrayal and framing. For those facing betrayal, James' story might offer a revelation. Sometimes, the best response is not to dwell on the past, but to decisively cut ties and walk toward a broader future. Betrayal is not the end of your story, but the beginning of a new chapter, provided you have the courage to turn away and never look back. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more wonderful content. Looking forward to seeing you in our next story.